Hello again. It's time now for the Eurosport panel, our review of the 2018 cycling season. What a season it was. Who would have thought we'd see 3 Grand Tour winners from these British Isles? Remarkable. No other nation has ever achieved it. But there was so much more in what was an incredible year. Here's a little look back.
Vincenzo Nibali picks up the first Italian win at Milano-Sanremo for 12 years. It is his moment. It is going to be the world champion in Roubaix, and he has what he came here for. It's going to be Julien Alaphilippe. He's done it, and we have a new king of Flèche Wallonne. Chris Froome, he has his fans, he has his detractors. What he also has, surely, is the admiration of just about everybody.
And there is Geraint Thomas. He comes from the valleys, he conquers mountains. Geraint Thomas is our Tour de France champion.
Simon Yates takes it, brilliant work. Chapeau, what a ride. Oh my goodness, Bob Bailey's done it. He's a world champion. That is unbelievable.
And we've all got a big smile on our faces now, haven't you? Some year, wasn't it? And I was fortunate enough to share 2 of those Grand Tours with some amazing people, 3 of whom I'd love to introduce to you now. First of all, King Kelly, Sean Kelly. Please put your hands together for Sean Kelly. We called him Cat Stephens on the tour. It was the Digital Hub team, former British Road Race champion, Matt Stephens. And the one and only voice, well, he's got many voices, in fact. Please welcome Rob Hatch. Oh. So what a year. And Sean, would you ever have imagined that we'd have 3 British Grand Tour winners in a single year, the way that we've seen Froome, Yates and Thomas do what they've done?
Never.
Never?
No, I think if you said that to me 5+ years ago, I would have said, yeah, Jonathan, you're totally crazy, it's not possible. And here we are sitting here this year for British cycling, and it has been so many great years over the past number of years, but this year it's just amazing, and it's going to be so difficult one going forward because now expectations, and to win 3 big tours, what an achievement it is, and to get anything near that, to repeat that again, it's going to be so difficult, and that's the challenges out there now. But it's done. You've got it. They've got the palm rests on their names, and sometimes going forward, Yates, for example, he had a super season and finished off so well with the Vuelta. Sometimes guys just get that confidence, and when they get the confidence, they can do so much more. That's something we'll wait and see. But he's proved this year that he's definitely a Tour contender for the next number of years. How many that will be, I don't know. In
a way, actually, all the 3 Grand Tour winners were tied together. That the stories were interwoven, Matt, because you probably guess that G was down to ride the Giro, and then suddenly $2 million popped up, and Chris Froome decided he was going to ride the Giro, and maybe Thomas got bumped to the Tour, and then of course Yates, we saw his emergence in the Giro, even though it was the Vuelta that he won.
Yeah, for me, I think, Sean talked about, you asked the question, did we think we'd ever be here? And if you kind of rewind to like 2008 or something, or even like 2000, when Dave Brailsford said, we'd set out and win the Tour. And then, of course, we had Brad winning it in 2012, being led out on the Champs-Élysées by Mark Cavendish, who was the current world road race champion. And for me, I would imagine many fans out there today, it's like, how can this get any better? And then, of course, Froome goes and wins the next 4 editions of the Tour. And then we have this year, it is quite incredible. But as you say, that Chris Froome, almost like the old stager now, but then you look at the apprenticeships, the very long apprenticeship that Geraint Thomas has served over the years in the service of others to finally emerge, not just as somebody that kind of just won the Tour. He like every Tour that was won this year by those 3 British riders was won with this beautiful panache, swagger, style. It was wonderful to watch.
Which is ironic when you get Christian Prudhomme talking about banning power meters and making racing more interesting. I mean, if you had 3 Grand Tours this year, which were complete opposite of what he's trying.
Exactly, and even the failure of one Briton in the. I mean, what if Shakespeare would ever to have written a play about cycling? It would have been the Giro, where you had 3 stage wins for Simon Yates, and then his catastrophic capitulation, and then the emergence of Froome. It was insane. It was beautiful, and that's why we're here, isn't it, Rob? We're here to share the passion of sport, and all different stories, but just insanely beautiful stories, weren't they?
The Italian press in particular went to town, didn't they, on that fantastic Froome win over many mountains at the Giro
d'Italia. From 80 kilometres out, we're all watching it.
None of us expected, did they? I mean, not one person in this room, I'm pretty sure, could have foresaw.
We thought they'd all come back together, that group of 4 or 5, wasn't it, with Dumoulin and
Froome had his stage win, hadn't he, in Zoncolan, and we thought, he sort of saved the Giro a bit, he might get up top 5, close to the podium, and then wasn't that catastrophic.
Steady on. We're not that rubbish, are we? That's.
Where were we? May. We're in May.
Stage 19. Bardonecchia is gone.
And I remember we watched it from a glamorous location. To reveal a secret here. We were in a car park. We weren't even on the top of a mountain.
We weren't. We couldn't get up, could we?
Paraphernalia up. And I remember we had some colleagues from the cycling podcast who were trying to find Dave Brailsford. Dave Brailsford didn't even go up to the top as well. He was on his bike riding the last few kilometres. And we finally got him at the bus. And there was a lot of satisfaction, there was a lot of delight. But you got the sense that he was still thinking about the planning from the night before. It was almost like he was in overdrive, and you started to get a sense of what had gone into that plan. And the talk with, I know a lot of people might think this is sort of overkill, typical Dave Brailsford talk, but the way they put all the soigneurs on the climbs and things like that, and you could tell that the brains were still ticking in Sky. It had been such a big logistical operation, and to have pulled it off, I
think it's interesting because although there was a lot of planning and it was quite clinical, what we saw unfold on the road was something of a bygone era, wasn't it, Sean? It was like watching, and the Italians loved it so much because it was reminiscent of people like Coppi and Bartoli, the way they.
What was interesting, though, wasn't it? Most of the time was taken not so much on the ascents, but on the descents, and it was almost as if the other riders, particularly Dumoulin, they didn't believe he could stay away.
No, I think, the Giro right from the beginning, it looked always difficult for Froome. We see he crashed in the warm-up of the prologue. Was struggling in the earlier days, then he crashed again, I think, 3 or 4 days into the race, and we did say, well, Froome is not going to win this Giro, he's not in the shape, he's not good enough. Then he comes back and wins that stage, and the following day he loses time again. So it was, a roller coaster ride from Froome, and I think, if we tell the truth, we didn't believe that he was capable of winning the Giro. I don't think any of our viewers out there really did, but when he did that ride of 80 kilometres, and as you said, Jonathan, on the climb, he took a bit of a difference, but on the descent, he did pull away on the descent. I suppose he had people chasing as well. We had, Thibaut Pinot and the teammate of Thibaut Pinot, who was not a good descender at all. So there was a little bit of
Reichenbach. Dumoulin said descended like an old woman.
Yes, he was like an old woman on the descent. So they were probably waiting
analogy.
a bit for him in the descent, but when they got together, there was 3 of them riding, and they just could not pull Froome back. It was just an amazing performance, and
it was a very un-Froome-like.
It was,
and as you say, that up and down. I interviewed him. I think it was in Osimo when he'd lost a bit of time. Yates had beaten Dumoulin by a couple of seconds.
Well,
and I thought he was out. He's gone.
Well, I think as they say in cycling, at that point in the Giro for Froome, it was shisha burst.
It was, but
yes,
as they say in cycling.
You're right, though, but it was completely all or nothing. And I was having a conversation post-Giro with Matt White about Simon. And I said, well, are you disappointed? and he said, and I don't think this has really got out into the press much.
And he said, look, mate. He said, look, mate.
And then he fell over because he was so drunk. But no, he said to me, he said, Chavez was the leader for the Giro. And he said that Simon was on such good form, they just said to him, just express yourself as a bike rider, just win, you know. And he won 3 stages, ended up in pole position. But when you looked at it, and I'm sure as an observer and somebody who knows about the sport, and in particular Thibaut Pinot, the way that Yates and Pinot rode that race, I thought was beautiful to watch. Pinot wasn't quite as good, but if you look at the ridiculously aggressive, violent accelerations and attacks they were putting in the context of a Grand Tour, it was kind of unsustainable. And
they got it wrong, didn't they? Mitchell and Scott got it wrong.
But it doesn't matter because what we were treating.
Well, it does matter because they got it wrong and they lost. No.
No, because he didn't go in to win the Giro. He went in to win stages, and they just. And obviously,
no, but Yates and Mitchell and Scott.
But
we saw, I think, that things changed later on in the year, didn't they? Because I think they admitted that during the Vuelta, they learned a lot in the Giro. This is how you have to approach things, particularly with Simon Yates, maybe with any rider. I mean, he was absolutely incredible, wasn't he, for the first 2.5 weeks?
Oh, you didn't think he could lose?
I remember having a conversation, actually. I know we alluded to this right at the start, my Lancastrian heritage.
Yeah.
We were talking about having a bit of a homecoming party in Bury.
Yeah, because you were going to head off with 5 Live.
And then, obviously, the day after Chris Froome got straight back into it, we were the line went quiet on that front, and all preparations for a celebration were respectively shelved until.
And you weren't asked to go to Monte Carlo, were you?
No, I wasn't.
For the big homecoming straight.
No.
We should move on to the tour now because time is getting away from us. But before that,
I think from the Giro, Yates, he was in a situation, an unknown situation, as Mitchell and Scott were. He was riding, very aggressively to get as much time as possible before the time trial because he had big time trials like Jim Molan, and he just wanted to get as much time advantage.
But he still had 3 big mountain stages to go.
But I don't think he was confident enough to take the time in those mountain stages. And but we all learned, he learned, the team learned that he did too much in the early part of the Giro. Paid for it in the end.
Yeah. So let's move on to the tour now. But before we do that, we obviously had the news beforehand about Chris Froome, the salbutamol case. That was resolved. And for me, what I found really strange was here was the great champion of our age in cycling. What he's done is remarkable. And there was no celebration that he'd been exonerated. Now, I don't want to be naive here, but genuinely, the sport, you felt, given all the negativity that often surrounds it, why not celebrate that he'd shown that it wasn't a positive test and he was free to ride? Why all the negativity? It's almost like the sport is shooting itself in the foot.
A case of being burned by the past, I think. People were far too used to this sort of thing happening. Public pronouncements then turning out to be false or whatever. I think a lot of people, whether it be fans, journalists, whatever, just held their fire and, okay, let's watch the tour. And I think people were fed up of it after 9 months.
No, I think you're right. But also, I don't think that we have any right to celebrate systematic ineptitude. Like WADA, the UCI.
But there is an element where you should celebrate because your great champion is clean in the eyes of the law.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe people don't believe
I just don't
the
think
law.
as cycling, we're kind of in a place to necessarily celebrate. It's more like, let's just move on. But it's interesting that you have that kind of point of view. I find it very interesting.
Did anybody, who here thought this was great for cycling when he was exonerated? Bloody hell.
Yeah. There you go. Anyway, let's talk about the Tour de France.
Let's talk about the Tour de France. So we can look at the dual team leadership in a slightly different way now with Geraint Thomas's pronouncements that they were going to leave him behind on the team time trial. So it was, Sean, slightly different from how we were led to believe at the time of the Tour de France that there was 2 protected riders, because clearly they went in with Froome as number 1, Team Sky.
Yes, well, I think we're learning all of that now. That is coming out. Slowly we're getting we're being told that Froome was the leader. He was the leader of Team Sky for the Tour, and I suppose you can understand that from a point as well, because when you see what Froome has been doing in the last number of years, the number of big tours he's able to win. The team has got the confidence in him, and I understand why, because he's just such a talented rider, and he's that big champion in the tours. He's able to pull it out of the bag on the days when you have to be able to do it. And a lot of people talk, Team Sky should have seized to win the Tour of France. But you know, you have to have a leader who's capable of finishing it off. You know, if Team Sky is working for somebody and they're not able to finish it off at these important times, well, then all that bloody work is no good. It's just a waste. And Froome was able to do that in the past. So for that reason, I understand why Froome are always confident and banking on Team Sky are banking on Froome to win the race. And you know, Geraint Thomas and I talked about it, and I think a lot of us talked about it. Well, Geraint Thomas always had a bad day in a big tour, and we were wondering when would he get that bad day.
We were all waiting for it.
We were waiting.
We were all waiting for it.
And also, given what had happened in the Giro, you almost felt like the same thing was going to play out again. Thomas had his lead, but Froome was going to come through.
Yeah, but I think in the context of what Chris Froome had achieved up to that point, you know, 3 Grand Tours in a row, you're kind of thinking, God, you know, this, you know, obviously the Salbutamol case was behind him, and whatever you think of Chris Froome and Team Sky, here was somebody, you know, I think it was actually, he didn't win, he was fatigued, he still rode remarkably strongly and got stronger towards the end where he beat Geraint in the final time trial, for crying out loud. And he is, and as Sean pointed out, he was the banker because of the experience.
Well, he'd earned the right, hadn't he?
He'd earned the right to be team leader. But we saw a young, no, it's actually not that young, what's Geraint now, 29, 30 years of age. Somebody who's done this,
32 now, yeah.
This really long apprenticeship in the form of his life, and it had this trajectory that we've seen before. We've seen it with Bradley, we've seen it with Chris Froome, dominated the Dauphiné, and came into the Tour de France as, yes, second in command quite clearly, but pulled it off and was the strongest rider.
Just before you say one thing quickly, who thinks, again, another show of hands, who thinks Team Sky played it really well in terms of the Froome and Thomas interplay? Yeah, I mean, it's better than the previous one.
Getting there. Try again, think of something else.
I'm learning.
Just a note on the Tour and on Geraint Thomas, and Sean touched on it in that we all expected a bad day. You know, you talked about Froome earning the right to be the leader, and I think that, you know, nobody really contested that apart from Geraint Thomas himself, obviously for normal personal reasons that we'd all want to win the Tour de France if we were good enough. But Geraint Thomas is an amazing story. If we think back to his Baller World days, did he finish last or second to last? I think he might have finished last in his very first tour. He got round, and this is a guy who's gone from finishing last, being a track rider, being tremendously gifted in the classics, which I don't think he's fully fulfilled that potential, by the way, just due to the fact that you have to choose, don't you? I want to ride 3 weeks, or I want to go and be a bigger guy and ride on the cobbles. And he's gone through, and in a book out tomorrow, the road book, I'm assured it's called, I think you'll know our Stato Killian Kelly from Ireland has dug up a nice little nugget. I read this today. Only one previous rider had won 2 mountain stages back-to-back on the way to winning the Tour de France. And just to show you what sort of company Geraint Thomas is in, that rider was Fausto Coppi.
So my question now is, do you think that we have given Geraint Thomas enough credit for what he achieved? There was almost, to me, it was almost a sense we spent the whole tour waiting for him to break, for Chris Froome to come through and take it, that we almost overlooked, just as you said, what he achieved. And you think of his range and the possibilities that he has as a rider. He's much more complete than Chris Froome, and we're going to speak to Bradley, and I hope he's not listening, maybe even more complete than Bradley Wiggins as a rider.
You like to be controversial, Jonathan, don't you? But
just come here to upset everybody.
I mean,
but genuinely.
No, I think we're all kind of reticent, because I don't think we wanted to jinx it, because it's only upon reflection, now he's achieved what he's achieved, that he's getting that recognition. But nobody wanted to kind of adorn him with that kind of the kind of weight of expectancy before delivering that first win in the Tour de France. And now it's happened. It's like, yeah, when you look back, it's again, I use the word context because that's what it's all about. But you kind of felt, because of, you know, the way that he's ridden the tours in the past, that there was going to be this day that it was going to, maybe the final time trial, the fatigue was finally going to seep in, because he didn't have a big lead, you know, but he rode in a very clinical, strategic fashion, but it still had that kind of flair, you know. His explosivity was incredible, and it was again very much like the way Simon rode, very much like the way Chris rode and won that stage up the Col de Finestre. The way that Geraint set about taking apart some of the finest opposition in the world and the 2 Alpine stages was really something quite special.
Sean, I mean, do you think Geraint is the sort of rider where to win one Tour de France is enough? I mean, let's take a Formula One example. You've got Nico Rosberg wins one title, and that's enough for him, and he retires. I'm not saying that G's going to retire. And then you've got Hamilton, who just wants to keep amassing titles, like Schumacher, 7 titles. What do you think of Geraint Thomas? That one Tour, maybe he goes to the Giro. Does he go to Classics because he's got the capability?
Well, I think, as you said, Jonathan, in the Tour, maybe we didn't give him enough credit when he was race leader. And the reason being, because Chris Froome was there in the background. And Geraint Thomas has been in that shadow for a number of years now. So we were all expecting that Froome was going to take it over at some time. But as the race went on, we could see that Geraint Thomas was so strong. And when he won the back-to-back mountaintop finishes, then we just started believing, well, this guy, like, unless there's some sort of a bit of flicking, as they say in cycling, he's not going to lose this race.
Yeah.
And by that, we mean that if some of the other riders attacked and Froome went away in a group, maybe 1, 2, 3 riders on a mountaintop finish, and Geraint Thomas had to sit back, that was the only way he was going to lose the Tour when we got to that point. So yeah, to answer your question, Jonathan, I think we did maybe not give him enough credit because of the reason he has been there for so many years in the in the shadow of Wiggins, then in the shadow of Chris Froome for many years, and for that reason. But going forward, it's a different situation totally. And the question you've asked, does he want to win another Tour? Reading what the little things have been coming out, he's already said he would like to win another Tour, but you have to wait and see what program of races they will be doing and all that. But so I think Geraint Thomas definitely, he wants to win another Tour, and that can be a problem for Sky and Chris Froome going forward.
So, and in all likelihood, with the prospect of 5 tours for Chris Froome, and he'll be the leader again, you would think. I mean, will he be able to impose himself on Team Sky?
Who manages that? How do they manage it? I mean, just
Call Dave.
Well, good luck, Dave. We talked about Geraint Thomas and the inevitable crack. Would somebody, as you say, flick him? And on more than one occasion, that was the complete entire discussion at our dinner table, wasn't it, throughout the Tour de France? You're trying to work the race out for the last stages. You're doing your homework informally, maybe over a glass of wine or a beer or two. I can't confirm or deny that.
And a pizza.
Or some
and a pizza or two.
Or some shitty also grill.
Well, we had a few of them this year, didn't
God,
we?
we did.
Flipping
Horrible
heck.
transfers.
Anyway, I think that it's now that Geraint Thomas has shown that doesn't happen, that it didn't happen, it's going to be very, very difficult, as you said, to manage that. And Sean's rightly said the noise is coming out this week. I know he's had a new book out, hasn't he, this week, Geraint Thomas? So there's been a few interviews, a few little nuggets have come out and said, well, yeah, I would quite like to ride it. But again, he talked about it with quite a bit of maturity. But now that he has gone and won it, surely his character's going to be stronger in the group.
Yeah, I also think it's interesting because obviously yesterday we had the Giro route drops and it's got 3 individual time trials in it. And you can
It looks harder than the Tour and maybe more suited to Geraint Thomas.
And yeah, with the 3 TTs, it is again, I mean, what Giro over the last 5 or 6 years hasn't been hard, but you kind of wonder whether, given the fact that he is 32, thanks for pointing that out earlier on to me, he's not going to win maybe 4 or 5 tours. I just can't see that, but maybe he could win the Giro, maybe win the Vuelta, maybe just get the complete set. I don't know. Maybe that's more what he might be inclined to do.
Or your strong point, Sean, the classics. I mean, how many years ago was it now when we were talking about him being the favourite for Flanders? 3 years?
Not that long ago.
No, it's not that long
15,
ago.
2016.
And almost that and we'll talk to Bradley about this a little bit later on, and there's certainly within him, I think, an itch that he would have loved to have won one of the classics, to go to the track and do what he's done, gold medals, to win the Tour de France, to win a classic would be quite something, perhaps even greater than winning 2 Tour de France's. I don't know.
Well,
or Tours de France.
Of course, a professional bike rider, you like to get the complete set as such. Win a Grand Tour when you've got that. If you've got the qualities to win
just run it down a bit of the
one of the big classics, the monuments, well, then you want to do that as well. And we did see Brad trying to do that, and he got quite close in the Paris-Roubaix. Geraint Thomas, I'm not too sure for the moment. I think he will concentrate more on the 3-week tours in the next 2 years at least, and maybe then a bit later, which is, you know, very possible to win the one-day classics a bit later in your career, meaning when you're 35, 36.
39 if you're Alejandro Valverde.
Well,
Well,
yeah.
Flanders next
You
year.
you can go on for a long time. Some of the riders, yes, 39, and so that is possible. But I think, yes, for Geraint Thomas, I think for the immediate, you know, years, I think, you know, he's going to concentrate on the big tours, the 3-week tours. Of which ones will that be?
Do you think that is as much a financial decision as a decision of the heart? I mean, I don't know. Will you get paid more? Is it about Team Sky set up for Grand Tours?
No, I think
classics?
you'll be. I think Geraint is in a position now where he can, to a degree, determine what he wants to do.
Okay.
But obviously, the big factor that will have an influence on that is Froome and Egan Bernal, who's now come into the team. And as you know, it's for 5 years. You know, it's the longest contract I've ever known. And Egan Bernal, I think, will win Grand Tours. But I think, for the time being, it's going to be the Froome, you know, Thomas conundrum. And that's going to be a very, very interesting kind of thing to play out.
With Bernal, again, the boy can time trial as well, can't he? As well as climb, he can do everything. So, do we think that next year he has to have an opportunity somewhere? Surely he has to be given whether it's a Vuelta or a
Maybe
Giro.
the Vuelta.
Surely he has to be given a chance, doesn't he? Because
But it's interesting hearing him talk during the Tour de France, where he did such an amazing job. He was still kind of pinching himself that he was leading out these big names, particularly Chris Froome. So there is still a sense of the kind of wide-eyed youngster that you wonder maybe he's still got one more year of playing the super domestique.
Yes, I think Bernal definitely have another year to play domestique. You know, we did see excellent performance from the Tour, but you know, you can do that when you've got the talent like Bernal, but to do it every day, it is difficult. And you know, when you can knock off a number of kilometres out from the finish of a mountaintop finish and just ride in at an easier pace, then of course, you know, you can recover quite well for the next number of days
the
next day. So I think for Bernal and for Team Sky, it's not a problem. The immediate future, meaning, you know, the next year certainly, maybe even for the next 2 years, I don't think he's going to be the problem within the camp. We also hear that Moscon, he wants to talk with the Giro as well. He says, well, the Giro next year, he's you know, talking that up as well. So, yeah, when you have a big team like Team Sky, you have so many chiefs, well, then it becomes a problem. And yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. Next year is going to be really interesting with Team Sky to see what way, and the next number of weeks as well, what programme the guys will be given, what races they will be riding.
Let's move on to the Vuelta. We've talked a bit about Simon Yates, but I mean, what a redemption, frankly. I mean, just a remarkable performance, and maybe a cannier Simon Yates after maybe getting his fingers burnt during the Giro.
Yeah, he had time to recover. He learnt, but you know, when you think about the way that his brother rode in this service, but also the maturity, and that there was two very, very different Simon Yateses. That, you know, when you compare the Giro, there was this flamboyant, kind of exciting. There was almost like a naivety and a kind of rawness to the attacking, and it was as I've said before, I could wax lyrical about it all night. And then you saw a far more focused and measured and mature approach to riding the Giro.
You say that.
You know, there was.
You say that, but even his brother didn't know what he was going to do. And even felt like Simon Yates didn't know what he was going to do.
What I mean is, not so much in terms of his attacking. I'm very much like Chavez. There's a real spirit within Mitchelton Scott about riders, you know, expressing themselves and riding on feel. You know, I spoke to Chavez a little while ago, and he was saying he uses a power meter only to record the data. If he feels right, he'll attack. The same with Simon. But what I mean was, in the latter part, where he was coming under attack in the final few days, he just let them go, just rode. There was a real composure and maturity, and I think he'd learnt that and rode in a completely different way. So there's these two different Simon Yateses, but both able to express themselves. But I think so much had been learnt from the Giro, and also that ability to rest mid-season. And it was wonderful. It was a masterful performance. It really, really was.
Just touch on what you started talking about at the start, Sean. You know, a lot of pressure on all of these riders next year with 3 Grand Tours. If you had to place a few of your well-hard-earned notes down on how many Grand Tours British riders would win in 2019, what would you go for?
See you looking at me
let's see who thinks 1 Grand Tour for Britain next year. 2?
Wow.
No, I think it's going to.
Confident.
I think the twos are going to have it. We get three in a row again. Anybody going to go for three? Nobody's going.
Some
for
big
three.
odds. There's some big odds there for somebody.
But who would the other lone? Who would it be? Would it be Nibali? Would it be Dumoulin? I think Dumoulin.
Dumoulin had a great, yeah.
I can't.
But then again, if you're Tom Dumoulin, you look at the Tour and only 2 time trials, you might think, hang on a minute, the Giro looks a bit better.
Exactly. But yeah. Otherwise, I mean, I know it sounds kind of. Who would have thought, like 10 years ago, we'd be sitting on a panel talking
One, two,
about.
or three.
No, seriously, talking about.
A lad from Bury winning a Vuelta.
Well, yeah, but talking about looking at the foreign riders who pose a threat to the British dominance of Grand Tours, and you think you've got riders like Pinot, Bardet, you've got kind of Nibali, and Nibali's in the autumn of his career, and then you've got and there's obviously some very exciting young Spaniards coming through, but a real proper threat, it still only for me comes from the Netherlands, and I think it's Dumoulin and kind of Roglic as a kind of side bet, but I just can't. It's difficult to see a major threat at the moment.
It's funny, you mentioned Nibali, a point. I think Nibali have been looking to go back to the Giro next year for quite a while, but having seen how much time trialling there is now, and depending on the fact, Dumoulin might be looking at it. We know that Simon Yates is no slouch in the time trial as well. I think Nibali might be thinking about a little bit more about what he does next year and whether he goes for GC, certainly at the Giro.
Well, he wants to win the Worlds, doesn't he? Nibali, has he won the
He
World
does.
Championships?
He hasn't won the
look at
Worlds.
his Palmares.
He tried this year and failed, but
yeah, I mean that's maybe something for Nibali as a focus. I don't know.
Well, I think the Worlds is possible to do, and also focus on a big tour. You can do that, and there's so much up in the air at the moment with the big two riders, Dumoulin as well. You touched on there. For the moment, nobody have really committed what they're actually doing. So it's going to be an interesting number of weeks now to see what the riders will what big tours they will be riding. But going back to Simon Yates, I think when we see him in the Giro, I think the director sportifs as well, they are to take a bit of the blame as well, the way he was riding in the earlier part of the race, attacking and riding 25 and 30 kilometres on his own out there. Trying to get a stage win and get that time bonuses for the stage victory. But again, it was a learning curve as well for the director sportif, for Whitey and the rest, because they weren't in that situation before. But yeah, he definitely burned a lot of his cartridges too early in the race and paid the price.
Yeah. Well, they haven't hidden that at all. They haven't hidden the fact. I mean, Yates was saying in the interview, look, I've got the reins on. They're not letting me attack for the first week or so. Exactly. And the director sportif as well. No, hang on, brakes are on. And when they let them off, well, it was pretty spectacular, wasn't it?
Well, we're done and run out of time. I didn't talk to you guys. Yeah, we are. I can't believe it. Fabulous to share the 2 Grand Tours with you. Absolutely brilliant, and great to talk to you about it. Just a big round of applause for these 3 guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.